What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you yet again, as usual. No morning show today because there is only one Christmas Eve game in all of the major sports. If you even want to call football a major sport, there's just one bowl game tonight, the Hawaii Bowl. All the other sports are off for Christmas Eve, and then we do have the Christmas extravaganza, where, of course, we have the new Netflix NFL doubleheader on Christmas tomorrow, so I will talk about that. There is one college basketball tournament, the Diamond Head tournament, is finishing in Hawaii. So that's going on tomorrow. So I'm going to talk about that. And we have hockey is completely off for a holiday break. So we have no hockey, unfortunately, because I've been doing pretty decent in hockey. And we do have, of course, the NBA Christmas schedule where they have, 5 or 6 NBA games, including my Boston Celtics. So I'm going to try to go through all of that as much as I can. I don't know if I'm going to hit every one of these games, but there really aren't that many games. So who knows? Maybe I'll try to just briefly touch on each one. I am going to have a couple of actual plays here, which I'm going to have one in the NFL. Let me enter these into my banners here just because, that's what I always do. One NBA, and I'm going to have one college basketball as well. So let me get those in real quickly. So that's I'm going to talk about those. Those are all tomorrow. Last night I did all right yesterday. I mean, I added 2 plays like basically on the fly. I was going to have a 2-play day, and it was that those 2 plays went 2-0. Seattle plus 11, man, nice outright winner, big underline money dog cash. Seattle basically led the whole way, upset of Washington. Nice handicap by me, if I might say so myself. And then we had the Buffalo Sabres, man. I told you I'm going to step in front of that train again. They got to end like a 12-game loss streak or whatever. And what did they do? They won 7-1 or something like that. So I got the Buffalo Sabres. So that was a win as well on that moneyline underdog. But hockey moneyline underdogs, I just play because I'm putting the entire bet on the money line. I put a smaller amount on it to win the same amount that I'm trying to win with the other bets, if that makes sense. But then the money line cashes on like spread sports like basketball, like that Seattle one. That was a nice little extra there with I think I only had 3% on the money line in that one because it was a bigger underdog. But that was nice as well. And then adding those 2 plays actually gave me a little bit of extra money. So instead of going 2-0, I went 3-1. So a lot of times that would mean that you won a little bit less than you would have if you went 2-0, but I actually won more because one of my plays was the Atlanta Hawks, and they won outright. And that money line cash on the Atlanta Hawks kind of overrode the amount that I lost on the hockey game, which was what was the game I played? It was a very small favorite price. I got minus 107 on it. Toronto, I think they did not show up in that game, unfortunately. And my lean on the Bruins was right. My Bruins, I believe they won easily, I think. I don't even remember who they were playing, but my lean was Washington Caps, I think. Bruins were able to take care of business in that one. So, unfortunately, I didn't play it. That was my lean in that one, though. But I did lose a little bit of money playing a very small favorite, though, less than minus 110 on the so it was less than what I would pay on a normal bet. So I didn't lose very much at all on the Toronto one. And, of course, the Atlanta Hawks money line cash plus the win on the Atlanta Hawks overcame that. So that was solid. Andrew, what's up, man? Thank you for the positive words, man. Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas to everybody. I didn't even say that at the top of the show. Merry Christmas. It is Christmas Eve. I'm not going to do a show tomorrow because I'm going to talk about the whole Christmas slate in this show because we only have one game today. So I'm going to try to get this done before I head out and see what's going to happen with the usual Christmas Eve party that my family does. If you've been following me on Twitter, yeah, I don't want to talk about it on here, but we got some question marks here. We'll see how this event goes, how sad or not sad it might wind up being. So we'll see how that goes. And yes, thank you, Andrew, for the positive comments about Tower Gang as well. We try to spread some cheer. It's cheer through being like racist, basically. If that spreads holiday cheer, that's how we do it there over on Tower Gang. All right, so I'll start out with the Hawaii Bowl, even though I usually do football last, but because this is the first game up and the only game tonight, the Hawaii Bowl, which is usually on Christmas Eve, but I think sometimes depending on what day of the week it is, sometimes it's on a different day. Last year it was on the 23rd, but the Hawaii Bowl is back on Christmas Eve. The way that I remember it being, man, it's tradition to have the Hawaii Bowl being the only thing happening on Christmas Eve. And this is a wild game, man. This is South Florida and San Jose State. And if you look at the opt-outs for this game, I mean, I have it up right here. There are some opt-outs, some injuries, but none of these are very key. Both starting quarterbacks, both of the primary running backs and whatever. I think both coaches are still around for this game, so not a whole lot to see in the opt-outs here. So I think both teams are going to show up and try to win this game. Now, the one thing is San Jose State, you could argue they have more motivation here and that they might be more used to this because they actually played in this game last year and they're in the same conference as Hawaii. So they're more used to playing in Hawaii, and they played in this bowl last year and they actually lost as a favorite. So that might be some extra motivation on the San Jose State side. They actually have not won a bowl since 2015, even though they've been in bowls 4 straight years. I think they've lost every single one of them. So I don't know if that's just a bad historical trend or if it means you're going to get motivation out of this team, maybe. But they have experience playing in Hawaii. They have experience playing in this bowl, and they might want to redeem themselves from that loss last year, even though I know the personnel is a little bit different and whatever. San Jose State, they're basically all a passing attack on offense, but their passing attack has been pretty good since they both of these teams actually switched quarterbacks, I think, during the season. San Jose State has been going with Eget for a while now. He's been putting up some pretty impressive passing numbers, even the Brown also was. But this is a team that mostly throws the ball. They don't run it a lot, but all these guys are going to be there for this game, I believe. They clinched bowl eligibility a long time ago, and they didn't play, I guess, as well down the stretch. They had to play Boise and UNLV, so it's not like those are easy games. Even Stanford's not really that easy an opponent, and they were able to, I guess, play respectably in the rest of those games there after they did clinch bowl eligibility. So I don't think there's anything to really take away from how San Jose kind of finished their season. A lot of times, if a team clinched a bowl early and they just kind of slacked off, you kind of don't want to be on that team, but I don't think that was the case with them. South Florida, they just got bowl eligibility, was 6-6, but they did it with 1 game remaining on the schedule. And then I think they just didn't care about this last game. They already had bowl eligibility. They'd blown out Tulsa. I think they just got caught. Didn't play well against Rice, which is Rice's senior night or whatever. So I'm not going to take too much away from that. South Florida could come into this game with a little bit of motivation because of that, because they lost the last game of the season. And you remember what I always say about 6-6 teams. 6-6 teams in bowls against teams with better records tend to actually have a little bit extra motivation because they don't want to have a losing season, and the bowl determines whether they have a winning season or a losing season, so they show up for that reason. However, South Florida does have a much more recent bowl win as they beat me last year, because I was playing on the kind of fired coach scenario in Syracuse last year, and whatever bowl that was. I think it was a bowl in Florida too. And South Florida, I think, hadn't been to a bowl I think I don't remember South Florida hadn't been to a bowl in a while, but that would have been a motivational factor on South Florida side. But whatever the case was, Syracuse did not even show up in that game. So I was completely wrong about that game. South Florida beat them 45-0. So you do have a South Florida team that won as an underdog in their bowl last year by 45 points. And then San Jose State was in this exact bowl last year against Coastal Carolina. And I believe San Jose State was like a double-digit favorite in that game, and they lost outright and didn't even show up. So that might put more motivation on the San Jose State side. However, if you look at the market, San Jose State's sitting at a 3-point favorite with 57% of tickets on them, but 57% of the cash on South Florida. So it looks like some of the money is coming in on the South Florida side. So as far as the side here, it's difficult, man. I don't know exactly what to do with this game. I know there are some professionals. There is some legitimate money coming in, taking the points with South Florida. But because of what happened last year, I'm not really sure I agree with that. And because of the familiarity aspect of this, I think San Jose State does have maybe a motivational edge here, and they have the familiarity edge as far as they're used to playing in this exact game and playing in this venue. So I do think that gives San Jose State a little bit of an edge in that respect. The way that I would look at this game might be to play the over and just root for points and have a nice Christmas Eve, basically, and not sweat it as much. I'm not going to play this game. The total is very high, but it's high for a reason. It's up from 62.5 to 64.5. So I mean, it has gone up a little bit, but these numbers around here, I don't know if they're really that key once the total gets in a range like this, but 70% of the tickets, 79% of the cash on the over. It looks like legitimate money is coming in on the over as well. I don't really disagree with it. Like I said, I mean, San Jose State, they can put up points. They can throw the ball. They can definitely move the ball through the air. South Florida actually has a decently balanced attack on their side. They've switched to Archie at quarterback, which seems like he was a step up from Brown, even though Brown was kind of a dual threat quarterback. Archie is more of a pocket passer, but he's put up better passing numbers than what Brown was doing. So you could take a look at that. Although once Archie came in, they were facing some worse opponents for the most part as well. So maybe there's a little bit less to take away from that because Brown did have to face Miami, Tulane, and Alabama in there. So I don't know. But Archie did put up better numbers, and their rushing attack is actually pretty decent with Joyner and Wright kind of both in the mix there. This South Florida offense is actually the more balanced attack out of the two. So if you like South Florida, you could bank on them having a better balanced offense. The reason I like the over, though, is I think both offenses are probably going to move the ball here. I think you might see both of these teams just, it's Christmas Eve. They don't want to get hurt on Christmas Eve. You might see a little bit less defensive intensity here, even though I do think both teams probably want to win this game, with South Florida being at 6-6, San Jose State having lost this bowl game kind of embarrassingly last year. Both teams do have reason to show up, and it is the only sports game being played tonight on ESPN, so they get a big game on national TV as well, so they don't really want to embarrass themselves, but they may put more focus in just playing a lot of offense and not playing defense quite as intensely, because if you play good offense and lackluster defense, it's less embarrassing, basically, for the most part. You just don't want to get blown out, and you don't want to make stupid mistakes. But these teams don't play great defense either, really. So the over, like I said, it's way, way high for a reason. I think this is the highest bowl total that we've had so far. So I would look to the over in this game more so than the side, because I can see reasons to play both sides in that game. So that's the Hawaii Bowl there. Moving on to men's college basketball. Speaking of Hawaii, these guys are all out in Hawaii. So these are these are all the teams, all 8 teams in the Diamond Head Classic. These are the only games up tomorrow. I'm going to try to hit these briefly. So these games are in order from like last place to first place, basically. So Oregon State and Nebraska are in the championship game for the tournament because they've won every game so far that they've played in the tournament. And it starts with Loyola Chicago and Murray State, who are in the 7th place matchup here because they both went 0-2 so far, which is crazy because neither of these teams are that bad. I mean, I think that Charlotte and Oakland and Hawaii are probably the lesser 3 teams in this tournament, and the other 5 are not that bad. So it's kind of crazy to see Loyola and Murray State being in this game. But I mean, they did both have to face. I mean, Loyola got upset by Oakland, and that just kind of set the tone. Not great, and they didn't bounce back from it and lost to a pretty good Charleston team. So now they're coming off of that. I mean, it's like, what exactly can you do about that? So Loyola, I mean, I think they might be in a little bit of a bounce back spot here, and they're up against Murray State, who, in my opinion, I think Murray State is the lesser of these two teams slightly, even though you can kind of see that that's being indicated if you just look at their records. But the odds makers are kind of telling you, well, there's not that much of a difference here because the line's only 1.5 on Loyola. But in this situation, even though I think if the public is going to try to play this game, they're going to come in on Loyola because they know the name, they know Sister Jean, even though they know Murray State probably as well, which is where John Morant went, but that was a long time ago. So they probably are more familiar with Loyola at this point, and they're going to see the records and say, well, 9-3 is way better than 6-6. So if the public comes in, they're going to say, oh, you're just asking me to pick who's going to win this game. Well, I'm going to take Loyola. But in this case, I think the public might not get this one wrong because Murray State, the problem with this is, so they had a tough task, to start this tournament. They had to play Nebraska, who's probably the best team in the tournament. So that wasn't easy. They probably weren't going to win that game. And of course they didn't. But then what happened was, they did get upset as a favorite here in this next game. So they may be in a bounce back mode for that reason because Murray State, unlike Loyola got upset as a favorite in the first game. Then they didn't bounce back from it. Charlotte lost as a favorite in the second game. But the issue I have is that this game went into double overtime, man. Murray State lost to Charlotte as a 5.5 point favorite, So, but this is a double overtime game. And so Murray State's coming off a double OT game. So I think the rest factor is not really in their favor. So that kind of has me leaning to Loyola a little bit because of that, but because the line looks a little bit off here and it looks almost too easy to take Loyola. And you could argue that Loyola or that Murray State is going to be in the bigger bounce back spot because they just lost as a favorite. I could see that argument, but again, the rest situation doesn't look good for Murray State coming off a pretty grueling double overtime game. So I'm not going to get involved in it. Loyola is sitting at a 1-point favorite. Again, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure which. My initial lean on this was because of the Murray State fatigue factor after the double OT game. My initial lean was slightly to Loyola, but that would be a very, very weak lean in that game. Charleston and Charlotte is the next game up, which is the 5th place game. Each of these teams have won one and lost one in the tournament. Charleston lost to Oregon State. I mean, Oregon State's better than Charleston, so they probably were not going to win that game. But then they pulled off a nice win over a pretty good Loyola Chicago team in a pretty competitive game. So Charleston is coming off a pretty big win, and they know they're not going to win this tournament. They are stepping down in class to face Charlotte, and Charlotte is coming off a double overtime game where they upset Murray State, though. So Charlotte is coming off the bigger game, even though both teams are kind of coming off big wins in this tournament. I think Charlotte might be the team more likely to run out of steam here. They lost opening the tournament against Hawaii, but this is on Hawaii's home floor. So beating Hawaii, you know, it's not the easiest task to beat Hawaii here on their own floor, especially that first game when you travel out there. So Charlotte didn't win that game. They were able to beat Murray State and pull off a nice upset in double overtime. So I think Charlotte probably is going to be the more tired of these two teams here. Charleston, even though they're coming off a big win as well, which is why I don't quite want to do it, but the lean would be to Charleston in this one. They're up from 4.5 to 5.5. I just think Charlotte, because they're coming off the kind of the bigger win, the more unexpected win and upset over Murray State. And it was double overtime. So that was a big game, big effort game. Charlotte might not have much left in the tank here, and playing a Charleston team that really likes to run the floor. Charlotte likes to try to play slow. Charleston's going to try to run this game up and really speed them up and get them even more tired. So if Charleston is able to do that, I think they should be able to win and cover this one. But then it's also going to depend on, are these teams going to be that motivated for a 5th place game? I don't know, but lean to Charleston. That's my second strongest lean in these tournament games. My strongest is actually a play, and it is Hawaii minus 2.5 against Oakland. I think Oakland is in the worst spot here. So this is the 3rd place game, I believe, in the tournament, right? Or was the one I just talked about, the 3rd place game? No, this is the 3rd place game. Yeah. So they're all in order. So Oakland won the first game against Loyola Chicago. I don't know how they determine which teams are in the 3rd place, which teams are in the 5th place games. I don't really know, because obviously the teams that have won both games are in the championship. The teams that have lost both games are in the 7th place. I don't know how the other part of the round robin style works, but however it worked out, Oakland pulled off a big upset win in the first game out there against Loyola Chicago as a 6.5-point underdog. Oakland was able to pull off that big win. And then they came around, and what did they do in the next game, in the what could have put them in the finals in this tournament? They were a 9.5-point underdog against Oregon State, who's, still one of the big boys, a bigger conference team, basically from the Pac-12, even though they've now moved into the WCC or whatever temporarily, I think, before the Pac-12 reforms, which is what's going on in basketball. Whereas in football, Oregon State was just kind of orphaned with Washington State in the Pac-2. But Oregon State, big favorite here. And what did Oakland do against them? Oakland played really well in this game. They had a lead for most of the game. They were winning by almost double digits. I think they were winning by double digits. Yeah, they were winning by 12 with 4.5 minutes left. They blew the entire lead. The game went into overtime. They retook the lead in overtime, and then they completely stalled out and didn't score again and gave up 9 straight points to lose the game. That is brutal, man. When you are this Oakland team and you haven't been doing that well this season, you almost pull off that huge upset like that. I think Oakland's in a bad spot here, man. They almost pulled off 2 straight upsets in this tournament. I mean, what are they going to have left in the tank after that? And now they're not going for the championship. They have to play Hawaii, who it's their home floor. I just don't think it looks very good for Oakland here, man. Even though I know Oakland has faced a more difficult schedule than Hawaii. I know Oakland shot really badly from 3 in that game, 19.2%. Oregon State, 45.8%. So that was an outlier. That's true. You might expect some regression or progression back to the mean. You might expect Oakland to not shoot that poorly from three again, but I don't think they have Jack. What was his name again? The guy that went off from 3-point range in their tournament upset of Kentucky last year. Jack, something with a G. I always forget what his name is. Gorky. That doesn't sound right. Whatever his name was. I don't think he's there anymore. So Oakland, I don't know how good of a 3-point shooting team they really are. The one thing you could say about Oakland is they face a more difficult schedule than Hawaii. They face Boise State, Illinois, Kansas, Toledo's not that bad. Wright State's not that bad. Youngstown's not that bad. Michigan State, even Cleveland State's not that bad. And then Loyola and Oregon State. So, yeah, Oakland has faced a way more difficult schedule. But, man, I don't know if they're going to have, like I said, I think they might run out of steam here, playing all these big games like this in this tournament, almost pulling off 2 straight upsets and taking Oregon State to overtime. I just don't think they're in a good spot here. And after this, they got to get out of there. They got to get back home, celebrate Christmas with their families. And then they got Arkansas up after that, which is going to be a big game for them too, against another ranked opponent. So I don't like how this sets up. It's almost like a sandwich spot. And this is not the championship game. Yeah, sure, they'd like to take third place in this tournament if they can, I guess. But, is that really that important? I don't really think that it is. Oakland is only 1-5 on the road so far this season, even though I know a lot of those were against really good opponents. So there's not that much you can take away from that. But Hawaii is also 7-1 on their home floor. So Hawaii has been pretty good at home, and they're on their home floor here, obviously, like I said. And Hawaii, they may have more fans in attendance here because it's a lot easier for those fans to just show up when they're at home rather than Oakland having to travel out here from Michigan. Hawaii, I know they have the better looking record, so it almost looks really easy to take Hawaii here. But in this case, I think it is the right move. Hawaii's the slightly better team, even though they have faced the way weaker schedule so far. They're, like I said, they're really good at home. Oakland hasn't been good on the road. Oakland, I think, might be playing real tired after those 2 huge effort games. Hawaii, on the other hand, they're playing at home, so they got their home crowd here, which is way easier. They beat Charlotte nicely to open up this tournament here, but as I mentioned, had a little bit of an advantage there in the first game because the teams have to travel out to Hawaii. Then Hawaii lost to Nebraska. There's no shame in that, really. Nebraska, like I said, I think they're the best team in this tournament. So, that was expected that Nebraska was going to win this game, but also Hawaii only shot 25% from 3. So Hawaii actually played pretty competitively in this game otherwise. Rebounds was close, turnover battle fairly close. Shooting was a little bit worse, but Nebraska shot 41.2 from 3, which is also quite high. So kind of some shooting outliers there. And by the way, this tournament is sponsored by Hawaiian Airlines, just because I like to see who the sponsors are, just to see if I can make any jokes about them, which I've been slacking on the jokes, by the way. I know I haven't made fun of enough of the bowl sponsors. Like, I think of something like afterwards, I'm like, oh man, that would have been funny if I said that. I'm not in tower game mode on this show. I'm in, man, I don't know why this mic is not tightened enough here. I'm not in tower game mode, so I'm in hyper autist betting mode, betting toad. So I'm not quite thinking about what jokes to make here, but yeah, I should try to combine the two and get into both. But again, there were some shooting outlier performances here from 3-point percentage. So Hawaii might progress a little bit from this, and you might see them kind of return to the mean here. So, you could say that about both of these teams, really, because they both didn't shoot well from 3. But Ken Bum has Hawaii winning this game by 1, but it's still a price where it's like pretty close to being a pick the winner here. If you wanted to do money line on Hawaii, you could probably get about -150, maybe even cheaper on that. I wouldn't mind that either. Hawaii is going to be the play there, though, for all of those reasons, even though they have faced a weaker schedule. Like I said, not a whole lot of big opponents here. They did face North Carolina, Grand Canyon. Those were basically the 2 biggest. And then Nebraska, obviously. Weber State, not really that bad either. So, yeah, Hawaii, it hasn't been all cupcakes for them. And Oakland's schedule has definitely been very brutal. But, I think that could take a toll, man, especially out in this tournament here like this. When you put in that much effort in those 2 games, you almost pull off that upset. I just don't see them having much left. So, give me Hawaii in that game. Hawaii had the lesser effort of the last 2 because they knew they were going to lose that game to Nebraska. And then the championship game is Oregon State and Nebraska. Both teams have won their way into the final here of this tournament. These are probably the 2 best teams in the tournament as well. So they were seeded that way, I'm pretty sure, which is why they haven't had to face each other until now. Oregon State's coming off that game where they almost lost to Oakland, though, like I said. So they did have a scare after they beat Charleston. Oakland took them to the wire, man, and they almost lost that game as a pretty big favorite. So that might focus Oregon State a little bit extra coming into this game. However, once you get to the championship game, you're going to try to win the game, man. Nebraska pounded Murray State, which is a pretty impressive win, holding them to under 50 points. This Nebraska defense has been playing pretty well in this tournament, man. And then they held Hawaii down, which is a little bit less impressive. But the odds makers are telling you Nebraska is the better of these two teams, sitting a 3-point favorite here, even though Oregon State has the slightly better record at 10-2 versus 9-2. So Oregon State, I mean, are they going to be able to use that slight extra motivation from almost losing the previous game? I'm not so sure, because that game did have to go into overtime. So it doesn't mean they had to put an extra effort there. And it's not like Nebraska is just not going to show up in this game. I mean, at this point, you want to try to win this tournament on ESPN2 on Christmas. This is the championship game of the tournament. And Nebraska had a much easier game than the previous game. So I think Nebraska probably would be the way to look here, because they're probably going to be the less tired of these two teams at this point. So that would probably be the way that I would look in that one, even though I know Oregon State is coming off a game where they almost got embarrassed and they probably should have won. So normally I would say that would refocus them. But in a game like this where both teams are going to show up, I think the tiredness factor is going to come into play. Let's move over to the NBA. Christmas NBA. All these games are on Christmas, by the way, except for the bowl game. Christmas, we got Spurs at Knicks is the first game up at noon Eastern tomorrow. I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. And the Knicks are down from 9.5 to 9. It does look like the money is coming in on the side of the Spurs here. 56% of the tickets and 65% of the cash on the Spurs, with the line looking like it's moving in their direction. The Knicks, we know they like to play more defensively, really. That's kind of their game, playing somewhat slower, but playing good defense. So a lot of times you might see them struggle to kind of get over, to like cover like a big number like this. They're coming off an easy win over Toronto, though, and they are coming into this game on a nice win streak. They returned home in that game against Toronto, and that looked like it wasn't a very good spot, really, because they were returning home from a road trip, and they had this Christmas game up next, which usually focus just because it's a nationally televised ESPN game on Christmas, even if it is against a mediocre team, but it's still against Wemba, man. I mean, you're probably going to step it up just to play well against him, or try to play well against him. So the Knicks, I thought that wasn't a good spot, and they still won. So that shows me something that's going to continue momentum into this game. So I wouldn't really want to fade the Knicks. I mean, the spot doesn't look that bad for the Knicks. They are the better of these two teams at the very least, but maybe you're probably not getting line value laying the points with the Knicks, which is probably why some money has come in on the Spurs, but it is probably just because of the line value, probably a numbers play. Spurs, I mean, they did just lose to the 76ers yesterday, and that was an embarrassing game for the 76ers, and they still won the game with, well, it was embarrassing for the reffing mostly, even though the 76ers look like they're in disarray. I mean, you got Joel Embiid losing his mind kind of out there. He got thrown out of the game, but I think it was an improper ejection, man. I mean, Drummond had been ejected prior to that, and it was a situation where I think Wemba flopped, and I think they called the foul on Drummond, which is a bad call. So again, it's these female refs, man. They should be fired. They don't know what they're doing. I think the Drummond play, I'm pretty sure he got a foul called on him. He complained because it was a flop on the part of Wemba, and I think he got like teed up for it too, for complaining about it. I think he got thrown out of the game too, which is ridiculous. Then that kind of set off Embiid, and then a little while later in the game, Embiid had a play where it looked to me like he was just being a klutz. He's just a big, like, giant, basically, and he fell. I don't really think he was flopping. I think he's just legitimately not totally in shape, and he fell, and they said that he flopped, and they called the flop on him, which is like an offensive foul or whatever. So they said that he flopped. They called a foul on him, and he took, he was mad about that. What's the term for that? I don't even remember. I don't even remember. I can't even remember words anymore, man. It's the stroke. I'm like brain dead now. He took umbrage, I guess is the word I was looking for, with that call there, and rightfully so. I don't think it was really a flop, but then he flipped out, which he probably shouldn't have done. He got ejected for it. But again, I think the reffing was just totally bad in this game. And then somehow the Sixers still won without Embiid on the floor and without Drummond. They still were able to win against the Spurs. So, man, I mean, I think the 76ers, I mean, with these guys back, they got Paul George back, they got Maxey back. They're pretty much intact at this point. So as long as they stay like mentally focused and they don't start losing their minds mentally, which it does seem like is a problem for Embiid. The 76ers team is more formidable than the record looks by far. So the Spurs wound up losing that game by 5. So kind of a weird game where the 76ers were a 5.5 point favorite in that one. I said I liked the Sixers to cover that, and probably they would have if Embiid didn't get thrown out of the game, but that's neither here nor there because I didn't have money on that game, so I don't really care as much. But it was really, I think it was mostly embarrassing on the part of the refs. So I don't know how to gauge this, man. Like, was that a tough game for San Antonio? Now they're playing another tough game, second straight game on the road. I mean, the spot looks like it sets up a little bit easier for the Knicks, to be honest. I just think that the line value probably is not there on laying the points of the Knicks. So I don't know what to do with this game. So that's obviously a pass for me. The next game up is my play, and it is the Minnesota T-Wolves. I'm going to go on playoff revenge here in this one, man. I'm going to take the points with the T-Wolves against the Mavs. The Mavs are up from 3 to 5.5, which worries me a little bit. But I think the 3 might have been like an earlier opener where we didn't know like what Luka's status was going to be. Because he was hurt. I think he missed one game. 81% of the tickets, 89% of the cash on the Mavs. So the money does for now look like it's coming in on the Mavs, but I'm not sure that come game time we'll still see that being the case. I think we know the Mavs are going to be public because everybody knows the Mavs won the Western Conference last year. Everybody knows they beat Minnesota, but that's going to factor into my handicap here as part of this. They beat Minnesota once this year already, and we're looking at a Mavs team that's starting to turn it on, and they're 19-10 versus a 14-14 T-Wolves team. But I think we're seeing some situations where we're going to get value on the Minnesota T-Wolves, man, because this record is not really indicative of what they actually are. You do have to look at what the injury situation is coming into this game, which I don't think we're going to fully know, but I don't think there are any like really important injuries coming into this. We don't really see anything going on here on the injury report. So I think this is basically just you're going to get these teams full efforts and full rosters here on Christmas Day. So that's what I expect here. The Mavs, they're coming into this game off of a couple of blowout wins. They blew out the Clippers, which I think the Clippers had gotten revenge on them because the Clippers had been eliminated by Dallas in the playoffs last year. And I think Dallas did lose to the Clippers. Yeah, they did right before that. So Dallas had gotten blown out by the Clippers. And that was a game where I said it was a bad spot for Dallas returning home from a road trip. That's why they lost that game. I should have played that game. The problem was that was the game that Luka was also out. So it was an injured player spot. So you were getting less value playing the Clippers, but it was still just such a bad spot that the injured player theory did not really have much of an effect there. Then I think Luka might have missed one other game. I think he missed the next game against the Clippers as well. I'm pretty sure he did not play in this game, but Dallas still turned it around and blew out the Clippers without Luka. Luka came back in this game against Portland, and they won another blowout. And now they're just coming into this game against Minnesota. And yeah, obviously Dallas is going to be focused. Both teams are going to be focused here, but I think you're getting some line value on Minnesota here, man. I think the 5.5, it's a little bit high. It's based on what we've seen out of these teams throughout the course of the season, what we've seen recently. Basically, it's based on like what their records look like because the odds makers have to skew the line a little bit, knowing the public is going to come in on Dallas, especially when the NBA is one of the big ticket items. This is one of the big games on Christmas, man. I mean, what games are going to get the most action on Christmas? Like we're looking at the basketball slate. It's probably going to be T-Wolves, Mavs might be the one that gets the most. Lakers, Warriors, Nuggets, Suns, maybe, but it's probably those other two mostly. And then the NFL games, obviously, are going to be the games that draw the most action here. So the books know they're going to get public action coming in on Dallas here. They're going to have to skew the line a little bit. I'm going to fade that sentiment. Dallas does have Phoenix up next, who's been playing pretty well recently. So I don't know if that's cause for a look at. Well, Phoenix, I thought they had a better record than that. They're actually same record as Minnesota. But the thing about Minnesota is I think Dallas could kind of in their minds maybe overlook Minnesota a little bit because they beat them to eliminate them from the playoffs last year. And they went into Minnesota the one time they faced them this year and beat them in Minnesota early this season. But Minnesota, I mean, they're still trying to like get new chemistry with their new pieces. I know I didn't like the trade for Randall. I don't think he's good defensively. I think it makes Minnesota worse. But still, Minnesota, I think they were probably going to be a little bit worse earlier in the season, trying to like regain that chemistry. You've seen they've really started playing better basketball since like mid-November. They have only had 3 losses since November 16th, and they were at Miami in overtime, coming off a win at Denver. So that was a ridiculously difficult spot at Oklahoma City. I mean, do you really expect them to win that game? Or wait, this is Dallas. What am I saying? Dallas has been playing really well. I'm an idiot. Dallas has been playing really well. What am I saying? So yeah, I am fading that sentiment on Dallas, but that's, again, that factors into the recency bias. I'm an idiot. I apologize for that. Minnesota has not been playing as well. I know they started playing well somewhere around mid-November, though. They did. They won a bunch of games in a row here. I remember that being the case. But yeah, since then they played a little bit worse because they've lost 3 games in a row, but it was to the Knicks, although I thought that was a pretty decent spot for Minnesota, and the Knicks just wrecked them, basically. But the Knicks are a good team. Then they lost to Golden State. I mean, not really much of a shame in that. And then I had Atlanta because I thought this was a sandwich spot, man. Minnesota coming off of a difficult game where they played Golden State really close, had to go to Atlanta, and then they had this game looming on Christmas. So I think Minnesota is going to be in a bounce back spot, man. They just lost as a favorite against Atlanta. I think that was a bad spot for them. I think they overlooked Atlanta. So now I expect Minnesota to be in a bounce back spot, whereas Dallas, I know they're kind of on cruise control right now, but I think that might be a little bit of a bad thing. And then, like I said, one of the major factors here is this is still playoff revenge for Minnesota. And now it's also in-season revenge because Minnesota actually, they lost at home to Dallas. And remember, Dallas is the team that eliminated Minnesota from the playoffs last year. So that's a big motivating factor. I think you remember the team that ended your season last year, man. And Minnesota, I think at a lot of times felt like they were going to win that series. I think a lot of people probably thought they were going to at various points in that series. They had their first game against Dallas on their home floor looking for revenge, and they couldn't get it done. So now Minnesota's still looking for revenge. And you know what better situation than to go into Dallas on Christmas and pull off the playoff revenge in this situation in Dallas's house. I think Minnesota would want nothing more than that. So I expect a very motivated effort from the Minnesota T-Wolves in this one. I think the Mavs might actually take them a little bit for granted because they beat them. They beat them in the playoffs last year. They beat them earlier this year in Minnesota. Minnesota certainly will not take them for granted. And Minnesota just had an ugly loss last night. So give me the Minnesota T-Wolves in this one, plus the points. And then we'll go to NFL. Oh, no, we'll finish off the rest of these. 76ers at my Celtics. I don't know about this, man. I don't know when this line was 4.5. I think the 4.5, I don't know. Yeah, I just don't understand, what Wager Talk is showing here. But the line is 10 on the Celtics right now. 89% of tickets, 86% of the cash on the Celtics. So the Celtics are public. To me, I think the 10 is just too high, man. I mean, you're looking at a Boston Celtics team. Everybody knows they're one of the best teams in the NBA. Obviously, that's not a secret. The public's going to come in on that side because do you really want to play a 76ers team that's, well, they're actually up to 10 wins now. I was going to say they're a single-digit win team, but still they have a hideous-looking record. But even so, man, I mean, the Celtics, one of the worst spots that the Celtics have is when they're at home and they think the game's going to be an easy win. Like at home is like a double-digit favorite and they just kind of think it's going to be a cakewalk. That's when the Celtics are not at their best, man. So that's the thing about the Celtics. However, in this case, the Celtics are coming off an ugly road loss at Orlando, which I know Orlando, not a bad team, but right now Orlando is a mess. I mean, we know they're missing their 2 best players still in Banchero and Wagner. So they both didn't play in this game. The Celtics blew this game. The Celtics were without Jason Tatum in this game, by the way. So it was a pretty injured game, but obviously Orlando was the more shorthanded team. The Celtics have so much depth that they really had no excuse to lose this game. They're a 7.5-point road favorite in this game. They're winning the game by like 15 at the half, and they somehow didn't win the game. Orlando, I mean, they've won 2 straight games now with huge comebacks, I'm pretty sure, right? Because they were losing this game to Miami by a ton late in the game. They came back and won that one. They were getting blown out by Boston, and they turned it around and won that one too. So I would look to maybe fade the Magic in their next game, but they're not playing in this Christmas slate here. The Celtics are. So will the Celtics bounce back from that? Because Celtics had a bad game there. I mean, we know Philadelphia also had that really ugly game where they still wound up winning, but they had Embiid and Drummond both thrown out in that game. I think you're probably going to see a motivated Philly team coming into this game too, man. And the line value cannot possibly be on the side of the Celtics based on what the records are here. So Philadelphia, everybody sees they're kind of in disarray, and they're going to want even less part of Philadelphia because of that here, and probably expect the Celtics to bounce back from that loss because everybody knows how good the Celtics are. But I don't know about this, man. Philadelphia, I would probably lean to taking the points of Philadelphia in this one. I mean, when they're at full strength and they actually are going to try to focus and win a game, which I think will be the case because this is Christmas at Boston, man. I mean, you're going to be focused on this game. I think both teams will be, but the Celtics might think that it'll be a little bit easier than the 76ers do. But the fact that the Celtics did just lose and blow a lead like that, I think that will refocus the Celtics as well. The Celtics are definitely good with Joe Mazzulla there. Like the Celtics definitely play pretty well coming off of a loss. So it's not really a situation where I'm really jumping out of my seat to fade the Celtics here either. So I'm not going to play this game, obviously, but both teams are going to show up here, and that means you got to look for line value. And the line value is probably on the side of the 76ers here. The line looks too big. Jason Tatum looks like he's a game-time decision for this game, so we don't know if he's going to be back or not. Drummond looks like he's injured. I mean, I'm pretty sure he got ejected from that game, so I don't know what the injury would be. But, I mean, keep an eye on the injury report, I guess. But even if Drummond doesn't play in this game, I don't think that matters that much. Jason Tatum is obviously the most significant of these injury statuses here, so you got to pay attention to that. And if he comes back, though, of course, the Celtics are going to have to work him back into the rotation, so they might have a little bit of a, like a chemistry issue again, trying to work him back in or in the early going here. So I could see maybe trying to take the 76ers to cover in like the first quarter in this game or something like that, maybe. But then again, the Celtics are going to probably come out focused from the get-go because they did lose their previous game too. So it's a difficult handicap in that one. Lakers, Warriors. Warriors are up from 3 to 3.5. 71% of tickets, 93% of the cash coming in on the Warriors. So it looks like the Warriors are getting some of the public action, but it also does look like the money might actually be coming in on the Warriors as well. I mean, the Warriors surprisingly actually have the worst record with the way the Lakers have been playing with old LeBron, and the Lakers just haven't looked very good. So it's kind of surprising to me that the Golden State has the Golden State actually has the worst record against LA here. But what do we have going on in this game? And actually, it looks like ESPN Bet looks like they had the Lakers at -10 in this game. That can't be right? I mean, did you see that on that page? That can't be right. Warriors -3.5 has got to be what it is. I mean, I don't understand that at all. You see this here, Lakers -10.5. That makes no sense. I think ESPN screwed that up. I mean, we could see. No, I didn't want to close that. I will close these other tabs though, just to clear things up. If we look at the actual game here, let me see. We got, it looks like ESPN Bet. I think everything is just fucked up right now. It looks like ESPN Bet. Oh no, here it is, 3.5. Yes, so the 3.5 is right on the Warriors, which is what I expected. Lakers, they're coming into this game off a loss to Detroit. So I think we're going to get a focused effort out of the Lakers. Golden State, they're coming off a loss as well to the Indiana Pacers. So I think we're going to get a focused effort out of both teams. And when you get a focused effort out of both teams, I'm going to, again, look towards the better team to probably be able to win the game. And that would be the Golden State Warriors. And again, it looks like the public is maybe not coming in on the Warriors as heavily as they should be, because the Warriors, taking 3.5 points with the Lakers when it is LeBron and the Lakers do have the better record does kind of look a little bit tempting from like the public's perspective. But I would not do that. I would lean to the Warriors in that game. And then Nuggets, Suns. Nuggets have flipped from a 1-point favorite to a 1-point dog to a 2.5-point favorite. Looks like significant money is coming in on the side of the Nuggets here. 54% of tickets, 58% of the cash coming in on the Denver side. I mean, the odds makers are telling you Denver's the better team. Obviously, I don't disagree with that. I think Denver is the better team. Denver does have the better record. The record's starting to look a little bit better than it was not too long ago. The Suns not having a great record there at 500 record, is what I should say. But of course, we know the Suns have been without Durant for some period of time. They've been dealing with some injuries. Beal has been out as well throughout the course of the season. The Nuggets had Jokic miss some games for paternity leave or whatever it was. Denver, here's the thing about this game, though. This is a zigzag type of game here, man, because the Nuggets just played Phoenix at home, and it was in a return home spot, and they still blasted Phoenix. And it was a back-to-back of an overtime game, which was a game where I lost on the Nuggets because they didn't cover. They returned home right away, no time off, and they still blasted Phoenix. That's crazy to me. that the Nuggets were able to do that in a spot like that. That just seems insane to me. Durant played in the game. Jokic played in the game. So not a whole lot going on for injuries. Nuggets were a 4.5-point favorite when the game went off here. And now we're looking at the Nuggets 2.5 on the road. So to me, it actually kind of looks like the line is a little bit too high, because if the Nuggets are 4.5 at home, that kind of indicates this line should be a little bit closer to like a pick 'em, maybe when they flip and go to Phoenix. So I don't know, man. So I don't know if I agree with this early move here. And I don't know if we're going to see the money start shifting, if it's a false move or something. It doesn't really look like it would be a false move to me, with the line continuing to move like this. And in basketball, I mean, 1s, 2s are pretty key. So the fact that it's going through those numbers makes it seem like it's a legitimate move to me. So I don't know. It's weird, because I don't necessarily agree with the Nuggets. You know that I tend to look towards the zigzag spot. And when it was a blowout like that, it's going to be the Suns that have all the adjustments to make in this game. And the Nuggets have Cleveland up after this game. So they might even be looking ahead a little bit to Cleveland, even though I know this is a Christmas Day ESPN game. So you're not really going to overlook it against Kevin Durant. But if you're going to overlook a game, I think, wouldn't it be a situation like this where you just blew out the same team and you have Cleveland up next? I think it could be. Whereas Phoenix, they've lost 3 games in a row. A couple of those games maybe against teams they shouldn't have lost to, Indiana and Detroit. Then they lost to Denver badly. So to me, it looks like it is a bounce back spot. They had to go into elevation for that game. So it was a weird spot for Phoenix to have to go out into Denver for that one game. It was a very bizarre spot for both teams, which is why I didn't play either side in that one. And now Phoenix coming back home. I know they have Dallas next, which that's a big game, but hosting Denver on Christmas, that's a big game too, especially when you're trying to bounce back and get right here. And you just played that same team, so you're going to have the adjustments to make. So I actually lean to the Phoenix Suns in that game. Not a play for me, though. And then before I get out of here, I'm going to be about an hour video or so. We'll talk about the NFL. So the NFL, the way they set this up, because these are Wednesday games. So what's going to happen here is the teams that played on Saturday are all going to play in these Wednesday games. This is on Netflix. Netflix is now carrying live NFL games on Christmas Day. And at least we get a bunch of playoff-bound teams playing here. So at least we do get that. So these games could actually be pretty good games, both of them. So we're getting, again, Chiefs, Steelers, Ravens, Texans. All these teams played on Saturday. So that's why they've set it up this way. So they had these teams play on Saturday. So now this is like basically the same as having a Thursday game after playing on Sunday. So instead of Sunday to Thursday, you're doing Saturday to Wednesday. Very similar to playing a Thursday night game. Except these games are going to be in the afternoon, which means that there's a little bit less time to try to prepare for this. So I do think that could mean that we have an advantage on the side of both home teams in these games. So that's kind of my thinking here. We do have the Chiefs, Steelers. Chiefs are up from 2-3. It looks like, I think this line was 3, like minus 110 before, and it looks like it's coming back down a little bit because now I see 3+ money. So it looks like maybe there are a lot of 2.5s out there on the Chiefs, which almost to me looks like they're begging you to play the Chiefs because the Steelers haven't played well the last couple of weeks, and the Chiefs continue to not lose. And when it's in a range like that where it's basically just pick the winner, it seems like the public is going to think, well, I'm going to come in on the Chiefs in this one, especially when this is a big Christmas Day game. The public's going to probably try to play these games. But the Chiefs don't really look that public. I see 51% of the tickets on the Steelers, kind of surprising me, and 56% of the cash on the Chiefs. I don't know how much I would take away from that, though, really. Because I do lean to the Steelers in this game. I think it is kind of a bounce back spot for the Steelers. And I don't have a, let me see here. Thought I had the NFL schedule up here, but I do not. So let's see here. So for the Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, we saw what they just did, right? They just beat Houston, which was kind of a whatever game. Kansas City, I mean, they've already almost effectively clinched the 1 seed at this point, though. The only way they're going to lose the 1 seed is if they lose both remaining games. Buffalo wins both remaining games. That's the only way, because Buffalo has the tiebreaker against Kansas City because they beat Kansas City. That's the only Kansas City loss. So Kansas City, I mean, they do still need to show up just to make sure that they win a game. That's true, but they're sitting pretty nicely here. I mean, I'm pretty sure they clinched the division weeks ago on the doinked field goal, the division doink against the Chargers. So that's not going to come into play here. But Pittsburgh, I think they are going to be playing with more motivation here, man, because Pittsburgh, they had a decent-sized lead in this division most of the season. Now they've lost 2 games in a row. Those are tough games, though, to Philadelphia and Baltimore. Even though I know I've also said Pittsburgh hasn't really done well against – they haven't really played very many good teams. That's the thing. I mean, they beat Denver. Denver is better than we thought they were, I guess. Beat the Chargers. Those are both, I guess, kind of likely to be playoff teams now. So I guess those wins aren't that bad. Dallas was still full strength when they lost to them. They did beat Washington, and then they did beat Baltimore in that first game, even though I said Baltimore did outgame them in the game. So Pittsburgh, I mean, maybe I'm overstating how weak their schedule has been a little bit, maybe. And then Cincinnati maybe is probably not quite as bad as we thought they were. So Pittsburgh, but I think they're in bounce back mode, man. I mean, they are coming off a tough game. That was a big game against Baltimore, no doubt about that. But this is also a big game. You're returning home now. You get to host Kansas City, the returning champs, on Christmas, and you need a win pretty desperately now because you just lost your stranglehold on the division, man. And you could have had the division. Pittsburgh could have clinched the division last week, and they failed to do so. So I think you're definitely going to see an effort out of Pittsburgh here, man. I mean, people saw them lose 2 games in a row and some pretty, highly publicized games here. Of course, that Saturday game was very publicized, as it was an isolated Saturday game where everybody was watching it. So Pittsburgh, nationally televised, whatever. I think Pittsburgh is going to come show like an effort here. I think you're going to see a defensive game in this one. The Chiefs really don't need this game as much. The Steelers are 5-1 at home, even though I know the Chiefs are 6-1 on the road, but their only loss was on the road. So, I mean, that's what you could say about that. Basically, Mahomes is still dealing with an injury, but he is still playing. I mean, obviously he's playing through it, but the Chiefs, I mean, again, the Chiefs offense, I mean, their offense hasn't been really what's been propelling them here. It's been reffing calls. I mean, we all know this. I got to say it again. The reffing calls have certainly been advantageous to them, but the Chiefs' defense has really been what has propelled them this year as well. And both of these teams, kind of that's the case. So you have 2 good defenses in this game. The fact that this totals up from 42.5 to 44, I don't agree with that move either. 71% of the tickets, 77% of the cash on the over. I would look to the under in this game as well because, again, I think it's 2 somewhat questionable offenses, even though you'd have 2 good quarterbacks. People are going to look at this and think, this is 2 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, man, and Mahomes and Wilson. Yeah, it is. But I mean, look at what these offenses have done this year. Not great. These teams have been much more about the defense. So I do think if both teams are going to show up and try to play in this game, which I do think will be the case, even though Kansas City is sitting a little bit more nicely than Pittsburgh is. So Pittsburgh does have a little bit more motivation here. I think you're going to see both defenses show up here. Both games were somewhat higher scoring. We saw the Kansas City game went to 46 last week, and the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game, I said that game should go over, and it went way over. But again, that's Baltimore. Baltimore's offense is one of the best offenses in football, so that's kind of what happened in that game. So I expect a lower scoring game here. Both these teams coming off highly publicized, somewhat higher scoring games with 2, very popular quarterbacks in here. I think the under makes sense in this game, and I lean to the Steelers as well. Neither is going to be a play for me, though. And again, I think the other part of this is that this is a quick turnaround time, and when you're not that familiar with the opponent that you're facing, which is the case in both of these games here, I think it's a little bit of an extra advantage to the home team because it's a quick turnaround time. So that team that's not used to playing in your stadium has to quickly prepare for it, quickly get ready and prepare for something. So I think that's a disadvantage to both the Chiefs and the Ravens this week as well. And that leads me to my play. Lastly, before I get out of here, I know you're not going to like this one, but it is the Houston Texans plus the points. Ravens are up from 3 to 5.5. I think the 3, I actually think was a look ahead. So I think this line has actually moved a couple extra points just because of what we saw last week. So we saw the Ravens kill the Steelers in a huge win. I was right about that game. I leaned to the Ravens. I kind of wish I bet that one. And we saw the Texans, even though they played pretty competitively against the Chiefs, I don't think the public is going to really care that much. They lost to the Chiefs and they lost Tank Dell, and everybody seems to be overstating that injury, man. I mean, a wide receiver alone, even if he is Tank Dell hasn't even done that much. I know because he was on my fantasy team, and I didn't play him this week, and if I played him, I would have won. Because why was I going to play Tank Dell against the Kansas City defense? And he put up 18 points before he got hurt. So, yeah, that's just great. Whatever. And And then, yeah, Jerry Jeudy had DTR as his quarterback, who was absolutely useless. So thanks a lot, Kevin Stefanski. Unbelievable. So Tank Dell being injured, though, that alone cannot move a line 2 to 2.5 points, man. Nico Collins is still there. I mean, the Texans, they have not relied on their offense most of this year, man. I mean, they've had wide receiver injuries all year. Diggs has been out for a huge chunk of the year. He was on my fantasy team as well. Collins has missed time this year as well. So they've played without Collins for multiple games this year as well. I know losing Dell isn't good. I'm not saying that. But, I mean, I think the Texans are going to be able to substitute some people in, and they'll still have weapons on offense. I mean, Joe Mixon has been a weapon for them. He's been good this year, but the Texans really, the story of their season is that they've relied on their defense, man. So this is what I like about this play. You're going to get the better defense with the Texans at home getting points, and I like a scenario like that. Getting points with the better defense, especially when the public is not going to like that side, and they don't. The public is going to love what they've seen out of the Ravens since they came out of the bye. Ravens went into that bye struggling a little bit. They came out of that bye, and they hammered the New York Giants. I mean, it's the New York Giants. The Giants just got drilled by Michael Penix and the Falcons. I mean, the Giants look like they're basically tanking it and trying to get the number 1 pick at this point. So I'm not going to put a whole lot into that Ravens win over the Giants at all. And then we saw the Ravens. I liked the Ravens last week. They had a huge bounce back win over the Steelers, but that was a good spot for the Ravens to do that, man. So that worked out well for them. But now I think the Ravens are also in a letdown spot because that's one of the main reasons why I'm going to play the Texans here. I think it's a huge letdown spot. I mean, Ravens-Pittsburgh, that's a massive, massive game. That's a huge win for the Ravens because if they had not won that game, they wouldn't be able to win the division. They'd be fighting for a wild card. But still, I mean, Pittsburgh and Ravens are both still fighting for the division. Yes, that's true. So they will still both have to show up for that reason. Steelers are still ahead of the Ravens. They still have the conference tiebreaker, so that is true. So the Ravens do still need to show up in this game, but I mean, I think it's going to be difficult for them to actually do that. I mean, I think they might overlook the Texans a little bit because the Texans' offense has not been good. The public doesn't like them at all. 77% of tickets, 64% of the cash on the Ravens. So this is shaping up to be a public road favorite Ravens team here in a nationally televised game where the line's going to be a little bit skewed towards the Ravens. So I think you're getting line value on the Texans as well. It looks like the bigger money is probably coming in on the side of the Texans. Public is coming in on the Ravens. So again, I like to look for spots like that. I think it's a letdown spot for the Ravens, even though you're not really necessarily going to have a letdown when you're still fighting for the division, but the Ravens did clinch a playoff spot with that. So they're in the playoffs. The Ravens and the Steelers are both in the playoffs. So it is just a matter of who wins the division now at this point. So there is that aspect of it. Texans are also already in the playoffs. They've clinched their division. So again, you could argue the Texans don't have a whole lot to play for because they clinched their division, I think, not even last week. I think they might have clinched their division the week before that because that's how bad their division is. So Texans, but I mean, when you're playing out the stretch like this, you have a nationally televised Christmas Day game with the Baltimore Ravens coming into your place. I think you're going to be focused, man. I mean, the Texans, not only that, but what other reason is there for the Texans to be focused here? Who ended the Texans season last year? That's the other thing that was like the clincher for me to put me on the Texans here. We got 2 revenge scenarios going on Christmas, man. 2 big revenge scenarios because it's playoff revenge for the Minnesota T-Wolves and it's playoff revenge for the Texans. And that was a game where I liked the Ravens. I think I played the Ravens in that game, actually. I think I laid the points of the Ravens. I think I also played the under in that game, and I think I might have won both. I don't remember. But the Ravens are the team that eliminated the Texans last year. That was in Baltimore. You know, I said that it was the Texans slipping into the playoffs with a rookie quarterback. The Ravens were the better team. So I laid the points. It was like 9.5 or 10 with the Ravens there. Ravens certainly got it done, but the Texans are obviously going to remember that, man. So the Texans are playing at home on Christmas Day against one of the best teams in the NFL, one of the better teams in the NFL, probably the best offense in the NFL, and playing the team that eliminated them last year and ended their season. You think that's going to motivate Houston and they're going to want to show up in this game? I think that it will. So I think this is a lot better for the Texans. The Ravens just came off one of their biggest wins of the season, like I said, against Pittsburgh, making sure that Pittsburgh couldn't clinch the division against them. Ravens have a short turnaround time and have to go to Houston. They have to go to Houston on a short week and have to prepare for Houston with not a whole lot of time to do it again. I think that's a disadvantage when you're not that familiar with that team and you have to go to their place. I don't think that's the greatest spot, man. So I think I like the Texans for that reason. And the Texans, quietly, man, the Texans have been pretty competitive against the best teams in the NFL this year. I mean, in spots like this at home, I believe they beat Buffalo at home. So they're one of the only teams to beat Buffalo. We saw them play the Chiefs to within 8 last week, which that was a nice performance from Houston as well. And I think that was on the road. Houston, we saw that Sunday night game where I won on Houston. Houston probably should have beaten Detroit. They were beating Detroit 23-6 at halftime. They wound up blowing the whole game. They still covered for me, thankfully. But this Houston team did play pretty well against some of the best teams in the NFL, man. So they're not going to be intimidated by the Ravens here. Texans have a good defense, and that's the other thing. The Ravens defense has taken a step back this year. The Ravens are mostly about their offense. Public likes the flashy offense. They like Lamar Jackson, all that, but I'm going to fade that sentiment. I think we're getting value on the Texans in this game. Too much value. I think the spot sets up for it. Give me the Texans. And then as far as the total, it is down from 47.5 to 46 with 89% of cash, 89% of tickets, 92% of cash on the over in this one. I would probably lean under in this one as well. I think the under makes more sense in the Chiefs-Steelers game. But this one, I think because I'm expecting the Texans to be able to show up and play defense in this game and maybe hold the Ravens offense down a little bit, that would have me leaning towards the under in this game as well. Because I think it's correlated. If you like the Ravens, you're probably looking for a higher scoring game here. If you like the Texans, you're probably looking for it to be lower scoring. That is kind of what I'm looking for here in the Ravens again. Sometimes you can see offenses struggle, man, in the quick turnaround time. Usually it's on a Thursday game. This is a Wednesday Christmas game, but basically same thing. Short turnaround time. A lot of times the offense doesn't really have time to prepare, and they sometimes don't have a great showing in that game. So that could be the case as well. So, again, a lot of those Thursday night games between teams that don't know each other, a lot of those tend to be lower scoring because teams kind of start feeling each other out. The road team doesn't have enough time to prep and whatever. So that's the whole case there, man. And that's going to do it. That's my Christmas Eve / Christmas Day video and slate there. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Whoever is in the chat here, but hopefully you guys are with your families. I'm about to be very shortly. I'm going to be going on the road and we'll, hopefully it'll be a good night. Hopefully it'll be good to see the family again. Hopefully it'll be good to have this party, and then I'll be doing that the next couple of days. So that's going to do it. Once again, I'm targeting Toad. My plays one more time for Christmas Day. I'm not playing the Hawaii Bowl tonight, but I am playing Hawaii in college basketball tomorrow, -2.5. NBA Christmas, Minnesota T-Wolves +5.5. NFL Christmas, Houston Texans +5.5. That's going to do it once again. Tower Gang Toad. Follow me on Twitter. Subscribe to the Tower Gang Patreon, patreon.com/Tower Gang. We're live every Wednesday except this Wednesday because it's Christmas. I don't believe we're going to be on. There is the possibility that we do a Thursday night or Friday night show. We will see. You'll get the notifications and stuff. Follow us on Twitter and whatever, and maybe we'll tweet it out and we'll let you know which day it's going to be. But be on the lookout for that. If we're going to do a show, it's either going to be Thursday at 9/11 or Friday at 9/11. We're the most offensive podcast out there. And subscribe to the Patreon anyway, patreon.com/Tower Gang. You get live pre-show, post-show, all that bonus content, man. You get to hang out with us in a Telegram, and that's going to do it. Merry Christmas, everybody. And I will be back, not tomorrow because I just broke down all of tomorrow's slate. So I will be back doing another show, I guess, on the 26th. And that's going to do it for me. Peace out, everybody. Let's have a good one.